This is the talk show that takes a no-holds-barred approach to politics, where truth and integrity are the standard and the Constitution honored. From Renaissance Studios, this is Champion News Talk Radio.
Good morning and welcome to another great edition of Champion News Talk Radio. We are brought to you by championnews.net, and we're your choice for the conservative voice. This is Carol Parisi. This morning, our founder, Jack Roser, and myself have brought back Mr. Rick Pere, who's an expert in radical Islam, special military operations officer, as well as a gun teacher. You teach people how to defend themselves against this radical firearms instructor. Good morning, Jack. How are you this morning?
Oh, I'm doing fine for an old goat. And I'm very glad to have Rick back on the program. For those that didn't get a proper introduction in our last appearance with you, you're a special ops man. You've served
I was
how long?
a special ops man. I also was in chemical and biological and radiological warfare, and I was also infantry.
How long did you spend in the Army, Rick?
38 years.
38 years long. I spent 3 years then, hardly comparable. That's a long time.
I started during Vietnam, and I just retired in October.
Well, what an education you got in the world to travel in so many places and see what was going on the inside. Remarkable. I've enjoyed talking to you off program too. You have a broad knowledge. You must be a reader as well. Nobody could know all you know by just action alone.
A lot of my education has been from personal activity and personal involvement, although I do read.
So it was from practicum, not theorem.
I'm a reader myself, and
a lot of it was practicum.
I know a fraction of what you do about all this, but I've done enough reading to be able to admire the depth of your knowledge. And it's time more people in this country learned. The big threat there is from what is radical Islam is the right description.
I think it's correct description, yes. We're under dire threat right now.
But, you know, I remember last week when we did the show, we were talking, both of you were talking, and you astounded me once again with your vast knowledge, Mr. Roser, about 700 AD with, was it Suleiman and...
Well, that was a little different than that. We're talking about the first incursion into Spain by Ben Yosef from North Africa.
This has to do with the fact that the general public and our press are insane, in an insane position because they don't know a damn thing about history. They think, for instance, that the English and the
Muslims or French or...
Oh, the name for driving the Muslims out of the Holy Land.
Yeah, the Crusades.
The Crusades. They think that the Crusades started, we drove them out.
No, the Crusades.
That is the reverse of the truth.
The radical Islam actually began, the first Crusades actually, in history it's not the first Crusades, but the actual precursor to the first Crusades began when the African emir went into Spain.
Yes.
And
they went over the Pyrenees into France.
No, that's different. He didn't get into the Pyrenees through France.
Well, they did later.
That was later. They came over. That was much later.
And that still put off what we call the Crusades because they not only got into Spain, they got over the Pyrenees into France, and they started
in Vienna.
And they finally got to Vienna where they got turned back.
It goes back a long time in a historical precedent.
That is the point at which the Crusades actually started.
Yes.
It was to get back the Holy.
It was defense.
It was to take back what the Islamic people had done in driving the Christians and the Jews out of the Holy Land. That happened much previously, and finally the Crusades came along to chase them back out of France and get them through Spain and to get them out of the Holy Land. It was quite the reverse. The invaders really were the people that are being held up as the innocents today. They've reversed history.
Now, how is that, especially considering the time frame when this took place? How is it that Islam was able to put such a happy face?
It's easy. It's easy. When you've got a press like we've got. Listen, I'm an old guy, and I am sick of the craziness of, it seems crazy to us, but our press has been selling us socialism in depth ever since the end of World War II and even during it.
It goes deeper than
This
that.
has been going on and on and on.
The mass media.
Our mass media is so full of crap.
With the exception of shows like this, our mass media is doing us a great disservice. After 9/11, the mass media markets were trying to find out what we did wrong to make these people hate us so much. Michael Moore even stated in one of his movies that there was no terrorism problem. There is no such thing as a conspiracy against the West, and they're incorrect.
They're wacky. This has been going on since...
The mass media have totally ignored this.
The time of the Crusades, this has been going on, but the people that were doing the aggressive side were the Arab, or if you will, radical Islam part of the Arab. You know, the Arabs never were involved in things like that, and were treated romantically by some of the movies.
You have to understand something here. Okay, so the Arab world made some very, very great cultural strides. And when Europe was going through the Dark Ages,
that's before radical Islam.
Well, at the time of the Crusades, okay, the city called Cordova in the Sinai, Cordova in Saudi Arabia, okay, they had lights when London was still a village. They had gardens when London was the streets of London were quagmires. But on the opposite side of it, mass beheadings, exterminations of all Christian people, okay, which is what's going on today. Coptic Christians in Egypt are being exterminated by the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt.
Let's bring out this program as we did before, because there's a learning process going on here. Radical Islam sees people in three categories. Islam, and they see those that are unreconstructed, the Christians and so forth are the far enemy. And there is an in-between thing is called dimony, and it's a stage of transition into becoming radical Islam.
Becoming a Muslim.
A Muslim.
A Muslim, but dimony. Okay,
and it's okay to cut their damned heads off if they don't join up with this radical thing that's so dominant.
The problem is we have so many different factional radical Islamic groups out today. It's not just Al-Qaeda. There are Al-Qaeda affiliated groups. Al-Qaeda in the Sudan, Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, okay? Ana al-Sharia. There are so many different organizations. Black September. And deception is at the very basis of Islam.
That is part of one of their tenets.
It is a tenet.
There's a name for it.
Yes,
look at what way that's
included in with, it goes under proportionality and the just rules of warfare according to Islam.
But now you cannot...
Deception is, and it's all right to lie if it's in the service of Allah and you are covering your tracks so that further down the road you can commence another attack against
Let's put this in perspective. Let's put this in perspective. The great religions came along at the time of Jesus. Before that, the Jews were writing
the scriptures, the scribes,
which came down to us in the scrolls that were found.
The Dead Sea Scrolls and Nag Hammadi.
Yeah, all of that. That happened in the time of Jesus in the year 1.
They were writing in Aramaic.
And but Muhammad came along somewhere in the 6th century, right. And this guy was a warrior that preyed on the caravans across the desert, and he managed to defeat one of the really heavily armed caravans, and that was presumed it could always go through, but he managed to beat them with the troops he'd got. And he attributed it to the victory to Allah, something that appeared in his dreams. That's 600 years and more after Jesus had started the religion, and the Jews, long before that, laying the groundwork for some of the ethics that proceed through that. Mainly a gentle thing, as gentle Jesus. But along came this warrior 600 years later and started his own damn religion.
And you know, if you want to go far back, this is going to be a little further back, but Abraham had 2 sons, Ishmael and Isaac.
You're going way back.
Well, Ishmael is the son of Muhammad. He's a great-great-grandfather to Muhammad. And
Not
there
the
is
grandson,
that
great-grandfather.
connection with Abraham, because that is why the Muslims say we are the sons of Abraham as
Listen,
well.
you can trace yourself back to the time of Jesus or anybody. Of course, there is a track, but there's a zillion other tracks that you could go down.
Well, the
It proves
problem,
we're all from Abraham.
but the problem
Yes,
today, the
yes.
problem we have today, though, is that people are concentrating on the differences. Okay, and that is particularly one of the manners in which Islam is actually taking over the Western world.
We're going to hear more about that Islam taking over when we come back.